I know a new Smash game is likely still very far away, but when the time comes, I'm very curious to know what it's gonna look like. Realistically, there will probably be a Switch 2 version of Ultimate that maybe adds a few more characters, brings back some of the missing stages, and potentially adds some more spirits. But that's not as interesting to talk about. What is interesting to talk about is what the next brand new entry in the series is gonna be. Now, I don't think this is gonna be for several years. Ultimate to this day is my favorite video game of all time, and there's very few things I would change about it. And if it is the final Smash game ever made, I'm okay with that. However, Smash is one of Nintendo's most recognizable IPs. They'll probably give the series a rest for a while, but at some point they'll likely come back to it. And when they do, I think they'll take the series in a few new directions. Give it a semi-reboot, if you will. Today, I'd like to share my image of a Smash Bros. Reboot and where I think the series should go. So without further ado, choose your fighter, and...
3, 2, 1, go!
The first thing I wanted to discuss is the game modes. I think pretty much every game mode should return in all of its glory. Of course, regular Smash is included in this, but I'd also like to see Tourney, Squad Strike, Special Smash, Classic Mode, Mob Smash, Home Run Contest, and Stage Builder return, as well as a few miscellaneous ones. In addition to these ones, I think it'd be awesome to get old-fashioned target tests back. Specifically, 64 and Melee's approach that gave every character their own unique stage. Not the boring crap show that was Brawl's measly 5 stages. And don't even remind me of Target Blast. I think a lot of longtime fans would also love to see Board the Platforms get a chance to shine again. It was a pretty fun game mode that hasn't been utilized since the series' first entry. In addition to these, obviously online play and all the stuff in the vault would return as well. Now, one thing in particular I'd like to talk about is spirits. I think the concept of spirits is very cool, but I also don't think an expansion of World of Light is what this franchise needs. World of Light was arguably too big as it is, but that doesn't mean the concept of spirits should be ignored in the next game. I think spirits could potentially replace event matches. Instead of being part of a story mode, they'd work more like how event matches do or how Spirit Board does. As a replacement for World of Light, I'd love to see Nintendo bring back a Subspace Emissary style of adventure mode. It wouldn't have to be exactly the same, but I think seeing all of Nintendo's characters interact in a big crossover storyline would be peak. Now, this does raise the question as to how the DLC characters would play into this, and I think I came up with a fairly realistic solution to this problem. While it may sound lame, the characters in the base game can be Nintendo exclusives, meaning that they would be the ones taking the spotlight in adventure mode. That just feels more organized than picking and choosing who gets to be in the adventure mode and who doesn't. Maybe Nintendo could even add DLC to the adventure mode if you get all the characters, that way they're able to play a role in it too. This is sort of my segue into talking about the characters in this game. Now look, I know a lot of people will get mad at this, but I think some characters do need to be cut after Ultimate. I think it's great that every past character returns in Ultimate, but this is going to be a reboot. This will give Nintendo a chance to start fresh and eliminate some unnecessary characters. I mean, come on, we don't need 3 Links. We'll start with talking about the characters that I think should return. Starting with the Mario cast, I think Mario, Luigi, Peach, Daisy, Rosalina, Yoshi, Wario, Bowser, and Bowser Jr. make sense to return. These are all highly recognizable characters in the franchise that I think easily earn a spot in a reboot. The only one I'm a little iffy on is Daisy, because her moveset was the same as Peach, but I do think they could update her moveset to make it stand out more. Speaking of which, I think a lot of returning characters could get new movesets, especially ones who have had the same basic moves since their debut. I mean, seriously, I think they can come up with something better for Luigi than turning into a missile. Speaking of Mario, let's talk about the DK series. I think every character that was in Ultimate should come back. Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong are the faces of the DK series, and after K. Rool's appearance in Bonanza, there's no way they're cutting anyone from this franchise. Moving on to Zelda, the only characters that I think really need to return are the main cast, Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf. Simple. Same goes for Kirby. All we really need is Kirby, DDD, and Meta Knight. In terms of Pokemon, there's so many that if you include a lot of them, you open up the discussion to including so many others. I think to keep it simple, we obviously need Pikachu. He's been the face of the series forever. We also should have Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Charizard. You could argue that these could be 3 characters in one by tying them to Pokemon Trainer similar to Brawl and Ultimate, but I think it helped them feel more distinct if they were their own characters. While we could draw the line here for Pokemon, I feel like there's one Pokemon that can't be left out. Mewtwo is one of the most recognizable Pokemon out there, and it wouldn't feel right not having this GOAT in a Smash game. For these next few, I'm just gonna rapid fire some of them off for the sake of time. Obviously, Samus and Ridley should return. Pit and Palutena also make perfect sense to return as well. From Fire Emblem, the only character we really need is Marth. The other Fire Emblem characters are just way too similar to him. I think just one Fire Emblem rep is necessary. Then of course we need Isabelle, Olimar, Shulk, Inkling, Min Min, Little Mac, Captain Falcon, Ness, Fox, and Mr. Game & Watch. Whew, that's a lot. Okay, these are the characters I think should return. There's a few more I'll touch on later when we start talking about potential DLC characters. I think it's also fair to talk about some of the ones I cut as well. I won't go into every character I cut because that would take forever. The reason I cut most of them was either they weren't iconic enough or they were too similar to another character already in the game. Starting with Jigglypuff. Cutting Jigglypuff felt like a crime since the original 12 characters have been in every Smash game. But if I'm being honest, it baffles me that Jigglypuff was ever included in the first Smash. Jigglypuff is far from being a fan favorite Pokemon. I just didn't think it made sense to include Jigglypuff in this one. Another character was Sheik. Sheik hasn't been a relevant character in the Zelda universe for a long time. Besides, she's just Zelda wearing a disguise. I didn't think it was necessary to include an alternate version of Zelda. Same goes for Zero Suit Samus. She's just Samus without the cool suit. I also did really want to keep Rob as a character, but he's such a niche reference that I just didn't think it made sense to include him either. I did also cut Villager in favor of Isabelle, since Isabelle is a much bigger fan favorite in the Animal Crossing community. Lastly, I cut Ice Climbers, Duck Hunt, and Wii Fit Trainer all for the same reason. While they all represent iconic games in Nintendo's history, their franchises have been dead for such a long time that including them felt a little weird to me. You could argue that Mr. Game & Watch should be cut for the same reason, but he's one of the oldest video game characters out there. While most people don't know it, he was a huge part of gaming's early days. Oh, and I cut Piranha Plant as well, because, well, it's Piranha Plant. How he made it into Smash at all is beyond me. So that leaves us with 38 returning characters. There's really only 2 new characters that I think should be included in the base game. Since we're only including first-party representatives in the base game, it's really tough choosing new characters since a lot of Nintendo's major first-party characters have already been added. The only highly requested character that at this point should be a no-brainer to add is Waluigi. Even if you don't think he deserves a spot, the amount this guy has been requested says something. Like it or not, this would be a big deal to a lot of people. The other character that I think should be included is Pauline. A lot of people might argue that she isn't big enough to be in Smash yet, and that is somewhat true, but Nintendo has been pushing her a lot since Odyssey, a game that was released 8 years ago. Crap, I'm old. She's sorta getting the same treatment Rosalina got when Galaxy first came out. Remember when Rosalina was shoved into everything, including Smash? That's sorta what Nintendo's doing with Pauline right now. I have a feeling that by the next Smash Bros, Pauline's gonna be an undebatable addition to the roster. While there are lots more characters that could be added here, I think for the next Smash, the focus should be more on tidying up the roster rather than adding to it. Obviously, I think Nintendo's gonna add more than just these 2 first-party characters, but for the sake of this video, I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible. Now let's talk about a bit more interesting part of the character roster, the third-party cast. Like I said, if the non-Nintendo characters were separated from the rest as DLC, that could allow for a much simpler and even more interesting adventure mode, as there could be a Nintendo segment and a DLC segment that introduces the third-party crew. We'll start by talking about the third-party characters that should return. Sonic's an absolute no-brainer. He's one of gaming's biggest icons. Not having him would almost be a crime. I think it also makes sense to bring back Snake as well. Metal Gear Solid isn't as popular as Sonic or even some of the other franchises included in Smash, but it's got a massive following that shouldn't go unrecognized. Plus, Sonic and Snake were the OG third-party reps from Brawl. It wouldn't feel right not having both of them here. Moving on, I think Pac-Man and Mega Man have also earned spots in this game too. Similar to Sonic and Snake, they were 2 of the first third-party reps in Smash. They're both incredibly important figures in gaming's history, so there's no doubt that they should return in the next Smash. Continuing Smash 4 reps, the 3 DLC characters being Ryu, Cloud, and Bayonetta should return as well. Street Fighter is one of the OG fighting games. People all over the world recognize Street Fighter instantly. Ryu easily claims a spot on this roster. Final Fantasy is one of the most well-known games in existence. It only makes sense for Cloud to appear in the next Smash. While Bayonetta isn't the most widely known character out there, she did win the Fighters ballot, which I think cements her a spot in the Smash Bros. Universe. Getting into some of the options we have that were added in Ultimate, things get a lot trickier. There's so many games that deserve to be represented, but at the same time, I want to leave room for new characters as well. I figured Joker earns a spot since Persona 5 is a very popular game. Same goes for Hero from Dragon Quest. Next up, Banjo is almost a must-have in the next Smash. The reaction this guy got when we finally got him in Smash was unbelievable. His ties to Nintendo in the N64 era make him a really special inclusion in a game like this. While some people will probably be mixed on this, I think Steve is a must-have as well. Minecraft may not be the most conventional game, but it's easily one of the best ones out there. There's a reason this is always one of the first games you think of. Not to mention, it's one of the few video game franchises to get a movie adaptation as big as it was. Sure, it was odd, to say the least, but it was enjoyable in its own right. Once again, another no-brainer is Sora. Sora apparently was the real winner of the Fighters ballot over Bayonetta or something, I don't really know, don't quote me on that. Either way, he holds a special place in the hearts, get it, of so many gamers. If Nintendo could somehow pull it off again, it would be incredible to see him return for another Smash entry. Those are 12 third-party characters I would love to see return. Before you get all angry, let me explain my reasoning for some of the series that I snubbed. I felt it made sense to only include heavy-hitting franchises. I feel third-party franchises are gonna be where this game can really expand its arsenal of new characters. After all, we'd all like to hear some ideas for new characters as well, right? The first series I snubbed was Castlevania. While the series has its cult following, I just felt there were better franchises to include. I also felt Fatal Fury and Tekken made sense to exclude as well, since Street Fighter is a much more recognizable fighting game that represents the genre much better. See? That's not too many franchises at all, right? Okay, now on to the new characters. There's infinite possibilities here, but I'm gonna focus on highly requested characters. For starters, I'd be shocked if Crash Bandicoot isn't in the next Smash. He's one of the most iconic characters in gaming. People have been requesting him for Smash for as long as I can remember. Not including him would be a slap in the face at this point. Another one is Master Chief. Crash and Master Chief were two characters people were praying for to be the last Smash character over Sora. The amount of people dying to see these two characters in Smash is incredibly high. Seeing these two video game icons is almost a necessity for the next Smash. Speaking of highly requested video game icons, Rayman deserves a spot in the next Smash as well. People all around the world know who this guy is. I think it's only fair he gets a chance to shine. Alongside these three, Phoenix Wright is another highly requested character from fans in the last few years. He would be a very unique addition to Smash and many fans would go crazy for it. My next few characters I have lined up are a little less likely to happen, but each character has its cult following. Starting with Shovel Knight. Come on, there's literally an amiibo of Shovel Knight. While it is an indie game, that hasn't stopped Nintendo before. Many indie franchises have been represented in Smash one way or another. I think Shovel Knight easily deserves a spot. And speaking of indie franchises, Shantae also deserves a spot. She's been requested for years now. I think it'd be really cool to see more indie representation in the next Smash. For the next character... My initial thought was to say Sans should be in the game, but there's someone else I think deserves it more. No, sorry Papyrus, not you either. Susie. While Sans would be a much more recognizable character, Deltarune is clearly a much bigger passion to Toby Fox. Deltarune is quickly becoming one of the best games ever made, and it's not even finished yet. Look, I am a little biased towards this game since I picked it and Undertale up for the first time about a year ago, and instantly fell in love with both of them. But the reaction Sans got when he was revealed as just a Mii costume was unbelievable. Imagine if a character from a Toby Fox game was a full-on fighter in Smash with their own unique moveset and everything. While you could argue Chris should be included over Susie, after chapters 3 and 4, Susie definitely feels more like the main character. She has so much more personality than Chris and would just be so much fun to play as. Also, imagine how amazing it would be to have the Deltarune soundtrack in Smash. I'm excited just thinking about it. Okay, there's one more character I think should be in this game. I feel like this is going to be a highly controversial one, but you know what? I'm fine with that. Five Nights at Freddy's has a much bigger following than people give it credit for. This fanbase is ridiculously committed, and I would love to see their reaction if Freddy got into Smash. I'll admit, I'm not an expert on the games, but I have watched quite a bit of Let's Plays on them, and even played a few of them for myself. It's a very fascinating series as a whole. Also, the series has not one, but two movies, and if I'm being honest, I thought both of them were really well done. Whether you love the series or hate the series, it's quickly cementing its place in the world of gaming. I think Freddy appearing in Smash is more possible than you'd think. An alternate option could be to include Springtrap since he's a much more prominent and threatening character. He was also the character included in the Dead by Daylight collab over Freddy, so it's quite possible he could beat out Freddy for an invitation to Smash as well. They'd just have to make him look way more kid-friendly. You know what, on second thought, maybe he's not the best idea. There you have it. This is my vision for what the roster of the next Smash game could look like. There are a lot more characters I could have included, but I think it makes sense for Nintendo to keep this one a bit simpler. One of Ultimate's most common criticisms, while I don't agree with it, is how many characters there are. It can definitely be overwhelming for newcomers, which is why I don't think we need another 80+ character roster in the next one. Now let's talk about something that's almost as important as fighters, stages. I'm gonna be honest here, I don't think I'm qualified to be making new stages, especially for some of the franchises I'm unfamiliar with. So I think it's fair that I stick to talking about returning stages. I have a few ideas here and there that I'll talk about for new stages, but for the most part I'm gonna be talking about returning stages only. For starters, Battlefield, Big Battlefield, and Final Destination all have to return. They're just fun, basic stages that everyone can enjoy. In terms of Mario stages, this was actually really tough. There's so many games and areas that deserve to be represented in Smash, but I also don't think it'd be fair if half the stages were Mario themed. So I did have to limit the returning ones to an extent. I think it makes sense to limit the stages to one for each mainline Mario game. Obviously, we have to include a stage that honors the game that saved the gaming industry. We have quite a few options to represent the original Super Mario Bros., but I think the stage that does it the best is Mushroomy Kingdom. This stage is a faithful recreation of 1-1, and it easily deserves to be in the next Smash. However, I do think they should modify it so it's not so boring looking. They could also probably change the name of it to just Mushroom Kingdom. They'd have the option to do that since this would be a reboot after all. I'm gonna rapid fire off the rest of the stages since I don't think they need much tweaking, nor do I really need to explain why it's justified to include them. I think we should have Yoshi's Island from Melee for Mario World, Princess Peach's Castle, which could probably just be renamed Peach's Castle for simplicity, for Mario 64, Delfino Plaza for Sunshine, Egg Planet for Galaxy, 3D Land for 3D Land and 3D World, New Donk City Hall for Odyssey, and Rainbow Road for the Mario Kart series. Luigi's Mansion, WarioWare Incorporated, and Jungle Hijinks should also be included to represent their respective spin-off games. There were a lot of options for the DK series, but I feel like Jungle Hijinks is the best representation of modern DK. Well, besides Bonanza, of course, but we'll touch on that later. While I could talk more about minor details I would change for each stage, I'm going to limit which stages I talk about for the sake of time. Specifically, I would like to say that I'd love to see some sort of overhaul for Egg Planet. I've always felt a simple stage with zero creativity is a terrible representation of the Galaxy games. I understand that it's hard to do something different with it since it'd be hard to make a stage feel like Galaxy with all the crazy gravity in that game, but they could do better than this. Maybe the Octoombas, yes, that's what they're called, could be incorporated somehow or something. I don't know, just not this. Alright, moving on to a different series, let's talk a bit about Zelda. While I know a decent bit about the Zelda games, I'm still meaning to play more than just Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. In other words, it's really not my place to pick definitively which games should be represented in Smash, but these are the stages I think should be included just based off what I know. Hyrule Castle, Temple, Great Bay, Bridge of Eldin, Skyloft, Gerudo Valley, the Great Plateau Tower, and Pirate Ship. I think those stages fairly represent the major areas of Zelda. In terms of Kirby stages, I know even less about that series than I do Zelda, but I think Green Greens, Halberd, and Dreamland GB cover a lot of areas just among those three. I don't think Kirby needs nearly as many stages as Nintendo's other franchises, since it isn't nearly as huge as Mario and Zelda, for example. For Pokemon, I'm a bit more educated on that game in contrast to Zelda and Kirby. I think bringing back Pokemon Stadium, Saffron City, Spear Pillar, Unova Pokemon League, Kalos Pokemon League, and Prism Tower is pretty reasonable. Pokemon Stadium could also be a merged version of both Pokemon Stadiums, similar to how Flat Zone X is both Flat Zones in one. For the rest of the franchises, I think it's reasonable only bringing back 1 or 2 stages, so instead of explaining, I'm just gonna rapid fire. Brinestar Depths, Skyworld, Palantainus Temple, Town and City, Tortimer Island, Castle Siege, Coliseum, Distant Planet, Gar Plains, Moray Towers, Spring Stadium, Boxing Ring, Big Blue, Mute City, or Port Town Aerodive, F-Zero SNES, Onett, Forside, Corneria, Venom, Orbital Gate Assault, and Flat Zone X. Holy crap, that was a lot. The only one of these that I think could benefit from some modifications is Palantainus Temple. I think if they cut the stage in half or something, it'd just be a lot more fun. Anything to make it smaller. While returning stages are important, I'm sure you're mostly interested in new stages. I have a handful of ideas for some new stages, but it is pretty tough. Ultimate kinda hit the nail on the head when it came to stages, so thinking of new ones is surprisingly challenging. We'll start with new Mario stages. I didn't think a ton of new stages was that necessary since we already have every major Mario game represented, but I still had some ideas. The first of which is Lake Lapcat. There's a lot of potential for a stage based on Bowser's Fury. There could be a cycle between the Serene Lake and the rage of Fury Bowser's attacks, which would keep things interesting. I also think the Flower Kingdom from Wonder being represented in some way would be really wonderful. I'm so funny. A stage that encapsulates all the wacky wonder effects offered in that game would be amazing. Lastly, I think it's about time we get a proper Bowser's Castle stage. It wouldn't have to be based on any particular one, so they could draw inspiration from lots of Bowser's castles. It just feels weird not having some of the most iconic Mario levels not represented in Smash Bros. Now, in terms of Mario's spin-off titles, the only one that I think really needs a new stage is Donkey Kong, and I think it'd be really cool if Planet Core from Bonanza got represented in Smash Bros. Bonanza was an incredible game and it easily deserves to have a stage in Smash. While there's a lot of different options they could use, I think Planet Core would be really cool. On top of this, I think there should also be a new stage for the Donkey Kong arcade game. It's an incredibly iconic game in Nintendo's history, and I think it deserves a better stage than 75M. I think if you made 100M into a stage, it would work a lot better, so let's go with that. In terms of Zelda, I think they really only need to add one more game. I feel like it makes sense for Tears of the Kingdom to get a stage into Smash since it wasn't out yet when Ultimate was released. They'd have a lot of options to pull from, but a huge part of the game are the islands you visit. So I think including Great Sky Island in some way would be a great way to represent the game. For Kirby, I think all they'd really need to add is a stage based on Kirby in the Forgotten Land. I haven't played the game, but a popular request from it seems to be a Live-O Mall, so I'll put that down. I did want to give Pokemon another stage, but it's a little tough to do that, especially when the stages already here cover so many iconic parts of the series. If any of you have any ideas for another Pokemon stage, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. That's really it for new stages. Well, Nintendo-based ones at least. Let's talk about some DLC stages. I'll start by just listing the ones that I think should return alongside returning DLC characters. Green Hill Zone for Sonic, Shadow Moses Island for Snake, Pac Maze for Pac-Man, Wily Castle for Mega Man, Suzaku Castle for Ryu, Northern Cave for Cloud, Umbra Clock Tower for Bayonetta, Mementos for Joker, I'm not even going to try to say that, Spiral Mountain for Banjo, Minecraft World, which I think could just be renamed Overworld for Steve, and Hollow Bastion for Sora. I don't think I really need to elaborate on any of these. Alright, now let's talk about new stages for new DLC characters. We'll start with Crash Bandicoot. There's a lot of options here, but a highly requested one is the Time Twister machine, so I think that's a fair one to choose. For Master Chief, there's also a ton of options for us to choose from, but I think the most fitting one is the Ark. It's a very recognizable location from the Halo series, so I think having it in this game would make a lot of sense. Next up is Rayman. Once again, we have some good options here, but I think the Dream Forest makes sense. A lot of fans have asked to see this one in Smash alongside Rayman, and if there's anything I know about Smash, it's that fan service is key. Now, I'm a little stumped on what to do for an Ace Attorney stage. I've never played the game, and the only option I've really seen from the community is the courtroom. so I guess they would have to make that work somehow. Moving on to Shovel Knight, he offers a decent amount of variety, but the Plains of Passage seems like the obvious choice. Shantae also has a lot of variety. Shantae is another game I haven't played, so I once again had to turn to its fanbase for ideas. The most logical one seems to be Scuttletown, so we'll go with that. We're finally on a game I know, Deltarune. But that's not making this any easier. Deltarune has an insane amount of locations, almost all of which are extremely iconic among the fanbase. But I had a unique idea that I think could work. The stage could be based on the battle mechanics. The fighters could be inside the green box, and lots of enemy attacks from the game could create all the stage hazards. It'd be a lot more fun if it focused on the non-harmful ones, but a few could cause damage to the players as well for variety. The stage could be called Rude Buster as a reference to the song that plays when you're fighting other enemies. Lastly, Five Nights at Freddy's is a really tough one to make a stage for. I think the best option would be to just make the FNAF 1 office into a stage and make the doors and lights a mechanic somehow. This could also give the rest of the cast a chance to take the stage. Man, I'm on fire today. I think this makes for a pretty decent stage selection. And with that, I think that's about every aspect of a new Smash game we could cover. I had a ton of fun making this video. I love videos that allow me to be creative like this, so if you'd like to see more, please let me know. It goes without saying that this is all for fun. I'm sure a lot of the stuff I said in this video isn't even close to being accurate, but I just like coming up with fun ideas to discuss. The next Smash will likely look a lot different from this. The purpose of this video was not to predict it as much as it was to just talk about some possibilities. Please don't take any of this seriously, it's all purely for entertainment. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing as it really means a lot to me. Okay, bye.